Welcome everyone back to another thrilling episode of PDs at Sea. We hope you've been enjoying the content we've been producing. We have multiple episodes that are in the process of being edited or finalized. They'll be posted soon as well. Dr. Stahl, how have you been? We're near the end of interview season.
I know. I was going to say, I think most of us are either wrapped up or close to wrapping up interview season. What's your quick summary?
So it was a wrap on December 20th for us. And in the interest of holding low pressure optional second looks, we actually finalized our rank list December 20th.
Awesome.
Yeah, we obviously the certification we change at any point in time, but we basically finalized it and we have no intention to change it, and we'll be doing some second looks. How about you guys?
Yeah, we wrapped on the 22nd. We finalized our rank list yesterday. And we are also planning no pressure, no interview second look for February. And I think it'll be interesting. It's exciting. Like, it's exciting to plan. I think a lot of us have no idea what that's going to look like. So we'll see. You're looking back this year. How do you feel like Signal's changed how you approached interviews as a PD?
I mean, they impacted almost everything that we've done. My instincts really needed recalibrating. We tried to give advice and counseling to students in our home institutions or students who are doing rotations with us or just calling us. And I did my best. I gave my best advice. I think it was pretty darn good, but I did see some things out there that surprised me. Before I talk about what surprised me or what I thought was good, how did it strike you? How do you think it changed things?
I mean, I think it's a win for program directors. Like, I think, and recruitment committees overall. Like, the amount of applications that we screened was substantially like about a third of years past. I did feel like that really freed us up to dig deep into them. And it was interesting to see. I think the one win for candidates is there were people who maybe were on the edge who, with a signal, it was like, you know what, we should meet this person in an interview. They're really excited about coming here. So I think that was probably the biggest win. I think for candidates, I think for programs, it is, I think, quickly becoming close to an application cap. Like, in my conversations with other program directors, I think it is a minority of programs that looked much outside of their program signals. And so I think it's going to be that's going to be the pressure, is to decide who you're going to signal in the future. Did you look at geographic signals much this year?
It really provided no value given all of the work that the gold and silver signals was doing for me. What do you think?
Yeah, last year I felt like we still leaned on it, and that came out in some of the data that Andrea Detroit had presented at AACPD. I think this year we had enough program signals. It was like going to that next tier just didn't feel like it was a huge value added. If you're a candidate's 16th program, but yeah, they want to be in the general area, that still just doesn't feel as strong as, well, you're their 15th or potentially their sixth most important program.
Yeah, the signal itself kind of is a way of encapsulating a combination of all of their preferences. Their preferences about the kind of program and the geography. And so the geography is almost already couched within what they've done with the signal. You said you screened a third. Let's dig into that a little bit. So, how did the signals impact it? Let me ask you some straight questions. Did you screen applications from which you received no signal?
Almost none. Some rare exceptions with, like, personal outreach or a couples, situation. But otherwise, really no. Like, if you didn't signal us, we weren't able to take the time to look at your application, and that's tough. And I think that's where the biggest need for this upcoming season is for us to advise better applicants, and to tell them, like, to be honest with them about that, to really help them figure out where they would be a good fit early so they can use their signals. Because I think we also had candidates who signaled us who probably weren't competitive for our program, and then messaged us feeling kind of disappointed, or kind of didn't understand why they weren't getting an interview, even though they had signaled us, like feeling like the signal should get me an interview. And so I think signals work best when you've got PDs who have a really good idea who they're looking for, and candidates who have a really good idea of what program they're looking for and where they'll be competitive. And I think that's on us in the field as faculty and leaders to try to message that out appropriately.
So can we play I show you mine if you show me yours? So I ran some stats.
Oh,
And so for a person who applied to my program with the gold signal, there was a 50 to 60% chance that they received an interview. For a person who applied to my program with a silver signal, there was less than a 15% chance of receiving an interview. So these stats are muddied a little bit. I think that all the Sinai applicants were advised to use silver to honor the request that they still signal. And I was a bit bold. I did tell rotators, when they asked if they should signal, I said, you will be receiving an interview regardless. And I did not give them an affirmative. So my stats are a little bit muddied. So if I say that no one without a signal got an interview, I am being honest. However, people who rotated with us and really
sure.
listened to me may not have. So basically, a very slim chance of getting an interview with the silver and a very solid chance with the gold and no chance without a signal, which was a stronger effect than I thought I would see pre-interview season knowing about the signals. So do you have a sense of your statistics?
I think our effect of gold versus silver was less than yours. Like, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I think it was closer to like 40-50% for a gold, but like 30-ish% for a silver. So silver like probably 20 to 30%. So like I think silver was still good, not as good as gold, but I don't think gold was as strong as your gold. Um, but I told the students who are here and who rotated to signal us however they wanted to signal us. So OSU, some OSU students gold signal us, some silver. It was a mix.
I uh I thought this would be the effect, and I felt pretty confident. Actually, this is a stronger effect than I thought I would see before I was all done with things. So I told a lot of applicants, outside of your signals, I would expect to get no interviews. However, early on in the season, I heard from a lot of applicants I was advising that they were in fact getting a substantial, not substantial. There are there are 4 or 5 programs that people I talk to might be applying to that seem to be granting interviews to people who had not signaled them at all. Did you see that? And how do you read that?
That's so fascinating. I have not heard that. It would be really interesting for us to dig in some more with some of the candidates, maybe after the close of rank list or somewhere where there's less pressure, where people could just be like, yeah, did I get how many interviews did you get at places you didn't signal? Because my gestalt is it's really low. But maybe I'm wrong. And I think I will say there are some exceptions. Like I met a program director who started a new program, and their program was approved after the deadline for signaling opt-in. So like they didn't have an option to get signals. So there are going to be some exceptions, I think, across the board. But it'd be interesting to see how many applicants felt like they got signals outside. And then that brings up the question is like, I think there's some conversations about expanding the number of signals next year, either adding 5 more silver or maybe adding a third tier, like a bronze type tier. And what do you think about that?
Well, I, I think that I do support it. So I am the chair of the academic anesthesia committee for the NYSSA, and some of our PD members of that committee feel very strongly that the number needs to be expanded. And they happen to be my friends, and I'm not losing anything personally. So I'm in support because I think we need to have a system that most broadly helps both the applicants and the programs. Um, the bronze thing I do find a little bit funny. I don't see the specific value in a bronze, um, other than people who are getting bronze signals, a lot of bronze signals, having to know that they are bronze in comparison to the programs. I think there's a little bit of elitism. But I
I
think
do
that
feel like the bronze signals probably help the programs. I think more silver signals helps applicants because your program will never know if you're number 6 or number 20. The bronze helps programs where, if you consider yourself a bronze residency program, you can go right to that bronze list and say, hey, these are people that I can probably pick from. I think that's, or if you're a platinum residency program, then you don't look past your gold anyway. So I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Well, I think we're having a hard time figuring out how to navigate it. In fact, if any program directors who really did give a lot of interviews to people without signaling them hear this, call me. I will interview you.
Yeah, for
I would
sure.
love to hear your thinking because, no offense, I think it's a very bad strategy. And in fact, I try to be very strategic about how I look at the signals. For example, if I got a gold and you are just a stellar applicant, the kind of applicant that any program director would say this is a top applicant, I figured that I was really in the running to be a program that you would visit.
Yeah.
When I looked through my silvers, I was actually a little bit different in my strategy than people might think. The stellar silvers I saw as very low yield
Mm,
interviews. And by stellar, I mean strictly statistics.
sure, sure.
Um, I
But they
used
could have been your number 6.
they could have been. But I figured if you were a person who might be overlooked a little bit, but you have great grades, your letters are amazing, but you might get filtered out because of numbers.
Sure.
I saw those people who look like quality individuals underneath some numbers that might get them filtered as being a better way of spending my time in my interviews.
Yeah.
So the stellar applicants who like used a silver on me, considering me a safety school, wasted their silver. Did you use any deep thinking or nuanced approach like that?
I don't think so. I think that we use, like, if the gold versus silver came up mostly as a tiebreaker, if we screen candidates and we're looking at limited number of spots, one versus the other, we would pick the gold over the silver. But otherwise, I think we looked at just like who did we think was the best fit for our program. And it'll be interesting though. It'll be interesting to see, and when we get some of the NRMP data after the fact, like how many spots per or ranks to match and things like that. Like if programs end up filling higher on their rank list because they got a group of candidates who are more likely to come there, the challenge will be that most programs will then want to further decrease the number of interview spots, which will make things even more competitive. It may though flip the switch on, like, historically we've said, gosh, you need to have about 10 interviews to have a really good chance of matching. And maybe that number is less if programs offer less interviews and they match higher on there. You only need 4 really good interviews and you're going to match. And so that will be interesting as well. What surprised you? You mentioned earlier you had some surprises. What surprised you about the process?
Well, I did seeing some of the people that I advised getting interviews from programs they didn't signal made me question my intuition. Another thing I've always told people is that the emails go a long way. And while I would still advise people to send emails, they were essentially useless for me. I'll give you a very
A
specific example.
non-signal email.
No,
Oh,
all
just all of them. Yeah.
all of them.
So the
So
signaling replaced that value in your
they
mind.
really did this. So in the past, you never know who's really interested in your program.
Right.
My system was pretty straightforward. It worked for years. I would send out 60 invites out of, say, 200. And then I would just sit and wait. And if someone sent me an email, I had, gone through all the applications and screened them. And I basically said, interview with emails or don't
Interesting.
interview. So they would send me an email. I'd open their application. I've already screened it. Oh, I said interview. They would get an interview automatically. If I were to do that this year, only within those people who had signaled me, I would have had to grant twice as many interviews as I've ever
Yep.
had in the past because I was flooded with emails. So this year, as opposed to that, I would take their name, I would put them on a list, and then at the end of the season, when we were down to like 15 interviews left, we selected those 15 out of about 100 who landed on the list because whereas I would give 60 interviews up front in the past, I was able to fill the majority of interviews right away with using signals. So the emails, one, came across as less sincere, and two, really weren't doing the work for the applicants. I still recommend it. The people who got the interviews at the end benefited from it, but most of them, their email didn't make a difference. How about for you?
Yeah, I do not think the emails were helpful. Like, and I think in the rare circumstances, I've generally told candidates like, yeah, there's low downside. Like, I don't think it hurts anybody, but it's probably not going to do anything. Particularly if it's I didn't signal you, and now I'm going to tell you that. Like, that just comes off disingenuous. And there were a few we had a few candidates this year who were like something changed, they learned something new, and they could articulate it pretty clearly. But that's definitely the exception and not the rule. And so that surprised me. It also surprised me some of the strategies that candidates used for signaling surprised me. Like we had a couple couples candidates where they had signaled their partner in another specialty signaled, but then they didn't signal us. And I wondered if maybe they were told like, well, your partner gets 10 signals, you get 15. Why don't you try to game the system? And then you end up with 25. I do not think that was an effective strategy at all. I think like you need to meet and align your signals. And if you have a differential number of signals, you probably should just be really clear about that when you apply. Like, I'm signaling you, my partner didn't have enough signals to signal you. That's important to us. I think really the call for help from candidates of like they want help identifying who they should signal, and then and I think a lot of the emails that we saw after the fact were this anxiety and desperation driven of like they sense how competitive it is and they're worried. And so I think things that we can do to try to message who is a good fit for our program early and often so they know that signaling us gives them a good chance, and then that hopefully also helps with their anxiety downstream from there.
So I did an open house this year, which I thought was very low budget, very just informal. And apparently the applicants loved it. And I think that one of the things I did was I was extremely upfront about the kinds of people we were looking for.
Nice.
And I was very honest in saying that we do a holistic review of the application. However, because we are the sole program in Manhattan that considers non-USMDs, I was very specific about the strict cutoffs we use for them. Um,
Nice.
I don't want people to waste their time.
Yeah.
Second looks, it sounds like you and I are probably doing this very similarly. I think we both share the ethic that we want to maintain not just the letter, but the spirit of the law. And while the SAAAPM or AACPD and other organizations never came on a firm consensus about when a rank list should be in before second looks, I think that we both forced that into our schedule such that our rank lists are submitted. I'm seeing different strategies. I'm seeing some people who are offering second looks throughout the interview season. And to be fair to
Oh,
them, they're blinding. Adam did an interview will be posted soon. He's blinded himself, and I know the guy. I'm sure he's completely honest. He's blinded himself as to who's coming. What are you seeing out there?
that's interesting. I hadn't heard so much about that. We did ask kind of peer institutions around the Midwest, and it sounded like the majority of them are doing some form of a second look. I think they're all going to look really different. What is your second look going to look like?
Well, our second look is still impacted by COVID. So
Oh, interesting.
getting the applicants into patient care areas is not something that we've gotten any firm go ahead for
Yeah,
from our GME. So there will be an on-site second look. They will be able to see all non-patient care areas.
sure.
They can look through windows maybe.
Yeah.
Um, they'll see housing, they'll see the site, and then there will be a social event, which will only contain people. I'll say only people who aren't part of the admissions committee. Our chief residents will be able to go because I think that's useful interaction, but no faculty will be there. We're going to hold four over
Oh,
from
wow.
January through February.
So we're holding one, and we are trying to pay for people's hotel rooms if they come in from out of town, to try to decrease the kind of cost burden, and then try to provide most of the transportation around town when they're here. We're gonna do a kind of dinner and then probably a resident only social after the dinner on Saturday afternoon, evening, and then Sunday morning, some event, some learning and touring and things at the hospital on Sunday morning, and then wrap up around lunchtime. So try to keep it contained to the weekend for maximum flexibility. Um, our DIO has been really supportive of us, doing this and really messaging. We've been trying to message as much as possible, like this is for them, not for us. I I always in the back of my mind still worry. I mean, I remember my wife and I couples matched. We took out a loan to pay for flying around the country that we only paid off like a couple of years ago. So I really hope like second looks don't turn into that. But like to your point, like I don't know that seeing the patient care areas matters, but I do think seeing the city, seeing where you might live, what this might feel like, hopefully that's a value proposition to the students. It'll be really interesting. I'm hoping that we'll be able to survey them afterward, like after match, and be like, hey, you came to our second look. Like, what did you think? What could we do? Because we are a little bit flying blind on what that, you know, what what they're hoping to get out of it.
Well, I'm not looking at, specifically who's coming to our second look, but, we have to pay for people and decide how many events we're holding. Uh, it's probably not totally finalized. Our first second look's in 2 weeks. We did 180 interviews, and I believe about 100 people are choosing to do the second look. And, I'm actually a little bit surprised. I thought it would be more. So I think they feel that the ball is
It's
in their
good.
court.
Yeah,
And
that's good. I would love it if people who are like, no, I already know all I need to know, like, then don't come. Like, that's okay. Like that. I want to give everyone the permission. I think all PDs would give everyone the permission. I don't know of anybody in this role who wants to feel like they have to come and spend this money to see a place.
well, I hope it goes well. So for next year, what kind of changes do you want to see? We talked about the number of signals. What kind of changes do you want to see? Or I guess maybe what advice would you give to either an applicant or a program director for doing this next year?
I think for a program director or more broadly faculty, and really I would love to see this get into like the dean's offices of medical schools, is really just to start. I still think there's a disconnect between them understanding how competitive the field is right now. Like I still think a lot of them are thinking it's early 2000s, and I think they are doing candidates or medical students a disservice by not advising them of, hey, you might not be competitive for the field right now. Let's talk about ways to help you get competitive, things like that. For applicants, I hope that candidates start early thinking about where they're going to use, like the biggest decision you're going to make after deciding to apply to anesthesiology is where you're going to signal. And so like I would treat it as such, like treat all your energy and time in figuring out, narrowing your list, looking, asking lots of different people about your competitiveness and where you'd be a good fit, and spending that time. Because I think the candidates who did it this year got benefit from that. And I think that will continue to be the case.
Well, I think the signals will save us a lot of time.
Yeah.
I would recommend to program directors that instead of saying, "Oh, this is great, I have all this time back to myself," no, take all that time and maybe more and
Yes.
contribute to providing information prior to the interview season. Because we need these applicants to really do their research, but in order for them to do it, I think we need to provide a lot more information through open houses, through our websites, through other events on the front end. So interview season's kind of moved up now. Interview season might be starting in
Yes.
August, September.
Right. Yeah, we were
Um,
doing open houses like, I mean, I think even some people were doing them in June, like June, July, August. Like I think that's going to be, which is hard because we understand people are going to have to decide. Do you think that anesthesiology is going to become like ortho or otolaryngology, where we see a huge increase in the number of away rotations, or people need to do an away rotation to be able to match somewhere?
oh, it's funny because I was actually questioning whether or not I'd open this can of worms. We did a recent interview with Adam Levine at Mount Sinai and Eric Romanelli's new program director. I was very fortunate. The interview lasted about 45 minutes, edited down to half an hour, but then we kept talking. We kept talking, and I was actually able to get permission to use some of that footage. And one of the things that came up is the fact that with the increase in, how do I put it, the opacity of the dean's letters,
Yeah.
we are getting less and less information. Listen, applicants want us to do holistic reviews of applications. Well, it's hard to do a holistic review when the applications become so opaque.
Yeah.
I would say the best thing you can do for yourself is now you're moving way up. Decide during your 3rd year
Right.
what
February,
program.
March, you got to just like VSAS opens in March, right? Like yeah.
So we got what our current intern class is 50% people with whom who rotated with us.
Wow.
I think that next year I think it's gonna be a little bit less, but it's gonna approach, a third to maybe 50% of our class with people who rotated with us. the best thing you can do is to do a rotation. And I would even tell applicants, if you do a rotation somewhere and you really like the place, a bird in hand might be worth two in the bush.
Sure.
And I got to tell you, someone rotates with you, you love them, they express to you how much they really like your program. It's as close to a shoo-in as you can get as an applicant, and that puts a lot of pressure on people. Doesn't that really now deny the benefit of this new virtual system? Because now people with the ability and the privilege to
Right.
rotations have a leg up, but I gotta tell you, as a program director who wants to have great people that who one will not only be great, but furthermore not provide any problems to your hospital or staff. Nothing does someone a better, service of getting you to know them than an away rotation. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I I am seeing students who never would have asked about away rotations start to ask now, and I think that's the paradigm shift. And so I think it's going to be a couple of years before we really see how that plays out. But and honestly, there isn't necessarily the bandwidth in a lot of places to do more away rotation. So, but it is an interesting like step in the kind of proverbial arms race around recruitment.
And I hear that deans are telling them they don't need to do away rotations for anesthesia. So again, going back to your comment about getting to their deans. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Stahl. It's such a pleasure. Any closing remarks for all of our colleagues out there who are also wrapping up their interview seasons?
Just congratulations on all the hard work. I think for candidates, hopefully you take a minute to recognize all of your accomplishments. For program directors, especially new program directors, congrats on getting to the other end of recruitment. It can be one of the more challenging parts of this job. For any of you who have ideas or topics or suggestions or feedback on today's episode, please leave us a comment because we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we would love to hear from you. I expect that this episode will get a lot of views because the other episode that was very much like it, talking about signals, is our most viewed episode. So thank you for listening to us and spending time with us, and see you next time.